All right, next I want to talk about the colonial India and the India's moved from a British colony to being independent, and the partition of India, how it was kind of chopped up into different countries during that time. And I'm going to hit some highlights, but I'll include some other video material that goes into a little bit more depth. All right, so India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, as well as a Myanmar, which we'll discuss later, were part of what was called, or Burma is, and Ceylon here, which is Sri Lanka now, were part of what was called British India. It was like the crown jewel of the British Empire of colonies at one time. All right, so at one time, I just want to highlight where the countries are again. India and Pakistan were part of a single British colony. And one thing I'll highlight here is that, let's go back a moment. So we talked about religion, we talked about how India has a Hindu majority, and Pakistan and Bangladesh here are a Muslim majority. And so in 1947, when the British are preparing to leave and not give up control of India as a colony, one thing they do when leaving is they partitioned it, and they did it in a hurry. But the idea was that they were going to chop it up so that you had two different countries, one with Muslim rule, and because it was majority Muslim, and one that was majority Hindu with Hindu leaders in charge. And I think the idea is to try to avoid religious violence, but it didn't quite work out too well. One thing I want to explain really quick is when we talk about India and Pakistan, at that time, what's now Bangladesh was part of Pakistan. Weirdly enough, that this was Pakistan and this was Pakistan. This was West Pakistan, and what's now Bangladesh was East Pakistan. And Bangladesh didn't become independent from Pakistan until much later, like in the 1970s, I believe. So anyway, the partition is between India and Pakistan, including what's now Bangladesh. And this resulted in a mass migration of minorities, because what happened is that if you were Hindu and lived in what was now Pakistan, you were fearful of what was going to happen after that partition, so you migrated to India, and vice versa. If you were Muslim and lived in what's now India, you migrated into Pakistan for fear of violence. And during the partition, it became incredibly violent, that there were, I'll include a video that shows a little bit more, but a whole lot of people died. The trains were attacked as they moved back and forth. You had trains where people on the trains were attacked, and so the train would show up with a bunch of people who had died already. It was a very brutal time in India's history, and it's left a lot of bad feelings between India and Pakistan. So just to kind of show you, this is prior to the partition in the Punjab region. This is how the percent of Muslims in the population versus people who were Hindu. And in the Punjab region, you had not a majority, but a high percentage of people in the Punjab region of India were Muslim prior to the partition. Now, jump to after partition, they're nearly gone, because a lot of people who were Muslim here moved over to Pakistan during this time of the partition. Now, so during the partition, one thing that was left unsettled is this area called Kashmir. It was what was called a princely kingdom. It was kind of meant to kind of rule, kind of take care of its own affairs. But as soon as the British pulled out, both Pakistan and India tried to assert control over this region. And so Kashmir region is highly disputed. It's a flashpoint where sometimes the fighting will break out, and it's an area that's kind of in a stalemate of armies between Pakistan and India. And not only that, to make things even more complicated, that there's part of Kashmir that are claimed by China as well. So this Kashmir region is locked in a three-way dispute between Pakistan and India mainly, but also with China. So let me actually show this. This is kind of easier to see here. So this is from a different textbook. This is the Kashmir region. In the book, it's called Jammu and Kashmir, but we can call it Kashmir for short. So this is controlled by India, but claimed by Pakistan. This is controlled by China, but claimed by India. This was ceded to China by Pakistan, but that's not recognized by India. So the point is that Pakistan controls part of it, India controls part of it, but then you also have land disputes with their neighbor China as well.